Hello, everyone. What's going on? This is the Noah Gillian Show, and I, of course, am your host, Noah Gillian. So happy you decided to join in today. It is the 14th of November, 2022, and on today's episode, we are going to be talking about some burning questions from Week 10 in the NFL, as well as wrapping up the Phillies season and looking forward to the offseason, which has already begun. Before we get into the show, though, please hit that subscribe button if you're following us on YouTube. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please give the show a follow. Please subscribe, leave a review if you would. Also, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram. You can find the show's accounts here at the Noah Gillian Show. You can find on Twitter at Noah Gillian myself, and on Twitter you can find it at Noah Gillian Show. But without further ado, let's just get right into it. All right, so to start off today's show, we're going to be talking about some NFL Week 10 burning questions. Before we get started, though, did want to just give a quick update. Last couple weeks, obviously, haven't had a show out. If you're following us on social media, if you're following us on Twitter, Instagram, you saw I put out a little video right after the Phillies lost the World Series. Actually just got married, yes, and was just on our honeymoon, so we're gone for a couple weeks. That's why we haven't had a show, obviously, over the last couple weeks. But we are back better than ever, ready to let them fly often. So we're ready to go as football season's getting into the teeth of it. Basketball season starting up. The MLB offseason we're going to be keeping up with. So tons and tons of stuff to cover. But I did want to mention that at the start of the show. But we are starting the show off with the NFL in Week 10. It's crazy that we're already in Week 10, already into the double digits. But there is a lot of questions that we have still to be answered as we move through the season. And to start off there, we will start with question number one. Number one is going to be, is Buffalo overrated? The Buffalo Bills, yes, lost probably the game of the year yesterday against the Minnesota Vikings. Minnesota went into Buffalo and defeated them 33-30 in overtime, which was an all-time classic of a game. Minnesota got stuffed on Buffalo's 1-yard line with 20 seconds left. Josh Allen proceeded to fumble the snap on the one. Minnesota picked it up, scored a touchdown. There was like 40 seconds left, and then Josh Allen drove them down, kicked a field goal, tie going to overtime, and then Minnesota went down the field, kicked a field goal. Buffalo got the ball back in overtime, and then Josh Allen threw a red zone interception. Just an all-time game, an all-time regular season game between two teams with phenomenal records, with Super Bowl aspirations. But from that game, we do have a question. Is Buffalo overrated? Currently the number one team in terms of Super Bowl odds, the number one shortest odds out of any team in the league, which means they are the odds-on favorite to hoist the Lombardi Trophy come February. But do they deserve to be there? There's a lot of questions to be had here. Obviously, Josh Allen, superstar quarterback, MVP candidate quarterback, doing so much right for them. But he is doing just that, so much. He has to literally carry this team a ridiculous amount. They have no semblance of a running game. He is pretty much the entire running game in terms of scramble, design runs, anything. Devin Singletary, I like as a running back, but they just don't commit to it. They're just not committing to the run. They're using the pass more than any team in the league, and it's really coming back to bite them in a number of ways. Like, they're up multiple possessions in the second half against Minnesota. You got to be able to close a team like that out, and instead they let the team back into it. And what do you know? Then you put yourself in unfortunate positions to make mistakes. Does Josh Allen fumble that ball? 9 times out of 10, Josh Allen's taking that snap, kneeling it, and the Buffalo Bills win. But the fact that you get put in that position where the opportunity for something like what happened yesterday to happen, that's what hurts so bad from the Buffalo standpoint. So when you're looking at it, there's holes everywhere. Josh Allen is not holes everywhere. That was a little bit aggressive. But you're talking about a guy in Josh Allen who is kind of reverting a little bit back to his wild ways in terms of the second half of games, starting to throw some more interceptions in the second halves, not being quite as efficient as he was last year, the year before, even, the beginning of this year. So there's definitely some concerns. There's some concerns in the running game. Obviously, we all expect Buffalo to be there at the end of the season, especially with the defense. The addition of Von Miller, they're still taking the ball away a ton. Their secondary is getting healthier as the weeks go on. So you expect them to be better, but the one area of the team where you really didn't expect them to be much questions, which is the offense, it seems as if there's some questions there. And, realistically, they really shouldn't have lost, or they really should have a couple extra losses on their resume, more than there already are. I mean, they could have lost to Kansas City easily. They should have lost to Baltimore earlier in the year. There's just they're playing with fire a little bit here. And I think that it's really going to be really, really interesting to see how they keep going on. Now, granted, Josh Allen is dealing with an elbow injury. It was a sprained elbow he picked up in the loss against the Jets. So that is definitely something to monitor. But he looked fine yesterday. He looked healthy. I know he's probably dealing with some pain there, but he was out there playing. You can't really give him a pass too much if he's out there doing his thing. So he still looked good. It was a great game. Obviously, props to Minnesota. We'll talk about them in a little bit. But just some questions. There is a few questions. So does that mean they're overrated? Getting back to the burning question, are they overrated? I don't know. I mean, considering that they're the number one team, and I would take a couple teams above them to win the Super Bowl in terms of just odds-on favorites. So yeah, I guess I would say yes, Buffalo is overrated in terms of, do I think they're the number one team to win the Super Bowl? Do I think they are the favorite to win the Super Bowl? What have they done to just be the number one? They made it to the divisional round last year. Granted, they probably should have beaten Kansas City, but what have they really done to just garner that kind of just locked in, cemented number one thing? I mean, they have been playing. Their defense is phenomenal. Josh Allen's obviously an MVP candidate. Stephon Diggs is one of the best receivers in the league. They are an elite team, but the fact that their warts are just kind of being covered up is a little questionable, and it's going to be really interesting to see. Am I jumping off the Josh Allen bandwagon? By any means, no. I still think he's an elite quarterback. He's an elite stud. But these were questions coming out. You have to tame him in. You have to refine his mechanics. You have to make him as more efficient, and then you'll get the best out of him. And, I just hope that he continues to stay efficient and doesn't, in a big moment, like last year you saw it in the game against Kansas City, that is peak Josh Allen. That is what you want, and you never want him to kind of get out of his zone where he feels like he has to do too much and he tries to force a ball into a tight window that's really not there, and kind of revert back to some of his bad habits. So overall, I think yes, Buffalo is slightly overrated when considering what the word overrated actually means, and not just are they bad. I think they're slightly overrated. Still great team, but overall in the things. And that leads us actually into question number 2 on our burning questions list. Question number 2 is, what is the top tier of the AFC? Now we're talking about Buffalo, obviously, and we're talking about, I mentioned already there's probably a couple teams I would take over them. We'll talk about the NFC in a little bit. Strictly the AFC, what does that top tier look like? And when we look at the conference standings, it's really, really interesting. Side note, just before we kind of start, because I don't think this team is considered in there, but, shout out to the Tennessee Titans, because I completely buried them all preseason, even into the start of the season when they were 0-2. I completely been burying them. And you know what? Mike Vrabel is just one of the best coaches in the league, plain and simple. He rallies his guys. Granted, they have Derrick Henry, but still, their offensive line is not strong. Ryan Tannehill leaves a lot to be desired. They don't even have a receiver over 500 yards receiving or 400 yards receiving. I mean, I think A.J. Brown has more receiving yards than all of their wide receivers combined. And their defense has been banged up. And what do you know? They're 6-3, sitting at third in the conference, leading their division. They got a couple games over the Colts, who are in second in their division. So they are cruising. They have the tiebreaker over Baltimore right now, who are 6-3. So it's just, there's a lot to, they're tied with record-wise between Baltimore, the Jets, and the Bills, and they're at the top of that whole list. So shout out to Tennessee, tip of the cap to them. But I don't know if they're quite in this top tier. So let's talk about the top tier. And right at the top, you have Kansas City. They're number one in the conference. They're 7-2. They are the cream of the crop in the AFC. And this is my fault. I totally was trying to discount them coming into the year. The loss of Tyreek Hill, in my opinion, was a big loss. You know what? Patrick Mahomes said, shut up. I'm still the best in the game and the best to do it right now. So listen, I can't hate on it. Their defense looks phenomenal. They still have Andy Reid at head coach. They still have Travis Kelce at the tight end position. They still have a very creative scheme where they can get whoever open. They go out and trade for a guy in Kadarius Toney, and he has a phenomenal game in one of his first games active. So it's like, they're the cream of the crop. They've been there, first of all. They've done that, second of all. And 3, they're playing even better than they have been. So they are number 1 to me. They're at the top of the top tier, and everyone should be looking up to Kansas City. When we talk about the rest of that top tier, these are teams that realistically could challenge for the crown in the AFC. Teams that could realistically win it. And in terms of teams that could realistically win it, you could probably spin that into a way like, if everything breaks right. And I'm saying no, like what they've shown this year along with what we think their prospects could be. So this is what the top tier looks like to me. We got Kansas City. You would have to include Miami in this top discussion. And there's some reasons why. They're 7-3. They're number 2 in the conference. And when you look at their team, they got Tua Tagovailoa playing fantastic football right now. You have 2 of the most elite wide receivers in the league in Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle playing at the top of their game. You have a running game bolstered now by Jeff Wilson Jr., Raheem Mostert, both healthy, both playing in a scheme that they're familiar with Mike McDaniel, who is a innovative offensive play caller. He's doing things that are comfortable for Tua. He's doing things that are comfortable for the running game, and he's getting the ball to his explosive playmakers on the outside. So box number 1, explosive offense, check. Number 2, what do they do at the trade deadline? They go out and make a splash, and they trade for Bradley Chubb, one of the elite pass rushers in the league from Denver, to shore up their pass rush. Oh yeah, they also have over $100 million shelled out to Byron Jones and Xavier Howard on the outside on their cornerbacks. So you have A, an explosive offense, B, a potentially elite defense with the right players around them, and C, the coaching staff it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out for the rest of the year, but they look like they know what they're doing so far. They're playing to the team's strengths. They're allowing their players to be successful and to flourish in their roles. So you got to include Miami in that top tier right now. Are they ahead of Buffalo? I think they're right neck and neck. And I think both of those are fighting for the 3 in this top tier. I think you have 4 teams in the top tier. I think you have Kansas City at number 1, and then you have Miami and Buffalo, I believe, are in the 3-4. You could flip-flop them either way. Number 2 to me, I've been riding them all year. The Baltimore Ravens. I'm sorry, they are. It's what I've seen watching them this year. I mean, right now they're 6-3, and realistically, they should have only 1 loss. Maybe. That's because they blew double-digit. They took Miami and Buffalo, had double-digit leads against both of them at home, and blew those games. Now, maybe you make that as a mark against Baltimore. I'm sorry, I don't. If you have a double-digit lead against those teams, I know what Lamar Jackson can do. I know what John Harbaugh can do. I know what that defense can do. They go out at the trade deadline. Who do they pick up? Roquan Smith, one of the best middle linebackers in the league, bar none. And you add him to a defense with guys everywhere, with dudes everywhere. They're getting healthier as the weeks go on. And like I just keep saying, like 2 of the other teams in this top tier, they've had double-digit leads on. They can beat these teams. They've proven it. Now it just comes down to doing it. They have a great defense bolstered now by Roquan Smith. They have a great running game in terms of Lamar Jackson, as well as Gus Edwards now getting healthy. Kenyon Drake has looked good. I'm still waiting on J.K. Dobbins to get back from injury. But Gus Edwards coming back is a big boost for them. The rest of their team is looking good. Rashad Bateman being out does hurt. He's one of their elite pass catchers on the outside. Mark Andrews being banged up, I'm concerned about because when Mark Andrews doesn't look good, it really kind of hinders Lamar's passing down the field. So if you want to bump Miami and Buffalo ahead of Baltimore for that reason, I'm not going to say no. I guess now thinking about it, talking through it with a couple of those injuries, maybe I slide them behind Miami and Buffalo. But I think those 3 are in a conglomerate. Those three are mix match. You can do it any which way. Baltimore has proven they can play with those teams and can beat them. And the other two teams, Miami and Buffalo, have proven that they can still be very, very good and they're healthy. So I think that after Kansas City, I think there's clear Kansas City should be the favorite. It's those three teams, and then it's kind of everybody else. I think the next tier is Tennessee. Shockingly, the New York Jets are in that conversation. The New England Patriots are in that conversation. The Los Angeles Chargers, Cincinnati Bengals, all of those teams are kind of, bunched up in that tier right after. So I think it's really, really interesting. I think those four teams, Kansas City, Miami, Baltimore, and Buffalo, are in that tier of legit AFC contenders. And then there's a couple teams like the Chargers, the Bengals. I'm not really sold on the Jets and Pats yet. Maybe the Titans will be in it come the end of the season. But there's a couple more teams that might be able to jump in there. But just for now, I think that's kind of the tier at the top of the AFC. All right, the number 3 burning question on my list here. I mentioned this. I don't even remember. I think it was about the same team, actually. Maybe a couple weeks ago, we were talking about the Denver Broncos and how I needed to hold myself accountable with calls. And when you're talking about, takes, and when you're talking about sports and you're doing all this stuff, you're putting it on a record and you're putting it out there, it's important to hold yourself accountable. And this is my number 3 question. How bad was my Super Bowl pick? I mean, are you kidding me? Denver over the Los Angeles Rams. These teams have a combined 6 wins, and we're in week 10. Like unbelievably bad call. Before the season, it's easy to look back on it now. The Rams are just a dumpster fire right now. You look at it, they lost Von Miller in free agency, and then Andrew Whitworth retired. So your best pass rusher, your best pass protector, both leaving. That hurts. Odell was very, very good for them. Robert Woods was very, very good for them. They left. That hurts. Cooper Kupp just goes down with a high ankle sprain. He's going to be out for a little while. Matthew Stafford has been elbow injury, concussion, just missed last game. Their defense has been struggling. They're just a dumpster fire right now. They're probably going to fall out of it, not going to make the playoffs. Denver just looks absolutely atrocious. I mean, they've scored over 20 points a couple times this year. They continue to just lose games they should win. And even then, they're still, I saw a stat today. If Denver had scored 18 points, only 18 points in every single game in regulation this year, they'd be 8-1. That just shows you how, A, they're good their defense has been, and B, how bad situationally their offense has been. And you kind of got to look at Nathaniel Hackett. I still kind of believe Russell Wilson is an upper echelon quarterback in the league. I love their weapons still. Javonte Williams going out was a big hit for the Denver offense, but how bad was that pick? I mean, oh my gosh, so bad that I can't even, holy moly. But I have to hold myself accountable for that. So I think that as we reassess now, we talked about those 4 teams at the top of the AFC, and now we're going to get into kind of the NFC picture and kind of talk about some more contenders over there, and maybe we can reform a better pick. All right, my number 4 question now, as we move into the last question here, is Minnesota a legit contender? 8-1. They're at the top of, they're in the second place in the NFC. And they just have been absolutely winning games. Now, I don't want to just go out there and say no. I think they are a legit contender. They have a defense that's opportunistic. They have an offense which has arguably the best wide receiver in the game in Justin Jefferson. They have a running game with one of the best running backs in the league in Dalvin Cook. And you got a quarterback in Kirk Cousins who knows where to put the ball, where it needs to go, when it needs to get there. And that is really what you need to do. And granted, their division has been a lot poorer than recent years. So just question, is Minnesota a legit contender? I think yes. I think the answer is yes. Now, when it comes down to it and when the playoffs come around, will Kirk Cousins show up? Because you can have Randy Moss on one side and you can have Jerry Rice on the other. It doesn't matter if your quarterback can't get the ball to those guys. And Kirk Cousins has shown he's struggled in big games, but he's also shown that he is a capable quarterback when given the chance. And he's been good in Minnesota. He's been really, really good. Granted, You can only play who's in front of you. So I do think that they beat Miami, great win. Obviously Tua didn't play in that game, so this was a great win though. Going into Buffalo and beating the Bills is an outstanding win. It's probably better than any win a team has in the NFC this year, outside of maybe the Eagles beating Minnesota this year. Obviously, with how good Minnesota looks, it's looking like a better and better win for the Eagles every single week. But I think the real discussion here is also just the NFC in general. You talk about the Eagles, currently undefeated, should be the odds-on favorite for the Super Bowl. They're undefeated. What do you want to say? They're number one in the NFC. And then you have the Minnesota Vikings, 8-1, half a game behind them right now. The Birds play Washington tonight. So, yeah, obviously they'll have a chance to go out to a game and a half. But after that, it's like, what do you want? You have the Seattle Seahawks at number 3 at 6-4 with Geno Smith. You got Tom Brady and the Bucks at 4th in there at 5-5, and then you have the New York Giants at 7-2, looking good. The Dallas Cowboys, the San Francisco 49ers, and then you have teams like the Commanders, the Packers, the Falcons, the Cardinals. Like the Rams are just way out of it. So it's like, what is the NFC? I think some people are having trouble buying into the Giants. I am buying in more and more every single week. I think they can be a legit team in the playoffs. Are they going to make noise in the playoffs? I don't know. I don't know how much I trust Daniel Jones. I do know one thing, though, which is a bar. I do know one thing, though. Brian Daboll's going to put Daniel Jones in a position to succeed. So that is going to be an interesting thing to develop. I'm souring on the Cowboys. That game yesterday against the Packers, which was a phenomenal game, by the way, just overall, just exposed what I believe about the Cowboys, which is their coaching is poor. They're not technically sound, and they're capped at the quarterback position. I'm sorry, like when it comes down to it, like your guy has got to do it for you. And Dak Prescott has struggled. He struggled in that game. You have a double-digit lead, and you can't get the job done. Like at the end of it, like I don't know, maybe I'm just sounding like too much of a hater here, but like the 2 interceptions late hurt. You have a 4th and 3. You're paying him $140 million. I'm sorry, I can be critical of a guy who's getting paid $140 million. That is, you have to go above and beyond and do it. And when you can't, then things come into question. Why are we paying you $40 million a year? That is when it comes into question. So you're looking at a team which has a great defense, but can be pushed around in certain. You saw what the Eagles did Sunday night. You saw what the Green Bay Packers did. When it gets down to it, you can push them around on the ground. I see teams like San Francisco doing that, especially a team like San Francisco. Philadelphia already proved to do it. Green Bay, not even the playoff. I mean, they're 9th right now in the NFC. Pushed them around. Like teams with really, really good running games. I could see the New York Giants pushing them around. Obviously, the Giants lost to the Cowboys this year, but come the second game, I could see the Giants with a little bit more confidence pushing them around. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see there. The 49ers are currently in the 7th seed. They're 5-4. Their team is, on paper, is one of the best in the league. I mean, you got Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk. Like that offense is a star-laced offense. Their defense is absolutely astounding. Jimmy G, serviceable quarterback, gets wins, gets the job done. It's just they've had a rough start to the year. I think they're going to pick it up as the year goes on. So when you really talk about it, it's really wide open. But at the top, you have the Eagles and you have the Vikings. And they've just proven to separate themselves a little bit. The Giants, again, they're 7-2. They're right there. But they're right there with the Buccaneers and the Cowboys and the Niners and the Seahawks. But I just think they're a step down. So now getting back to the question, is Minnesota a legit contender? Yeah, they are, because they are currently in the top echelon with the Eagles, I think, as presumptive favorites to come out of the NFC. All right, we're going to switch it up now and talk about a little bit of baseball here. We are going to wrap up the Philadelphia Phillies season from the 2022 season. Obviously, a dream ride, a Cinderella ride, if you will, all the way to the World Series, where they came within 2 wins of raising the Commissioner's Trophy, but unfortunately couldn't get the job done. I don't want to make excuses for them. They definitely ran into a juggernaut team in the Houston Astros. I think they got beat. I don't think they really went out of their way to lose this series. I think Houston was just built for this moment. They have clutch hitters, as proved in Game 6 of what we saw there. They have clutch hitters. They have lockdown pitching. And at the end of the day, that's the formula that wins in October, and that's the formula that proved to win in October again. The Astros beat the Phillies 4-2 in the World Series. Again, the Phillies had a 2-1 lead in the World Series. Didn't get their best outings from Aaron Nola. We'll talk about that more. But, also the decision to pull Zach Wheeler in that Game 6, I don't love it. But then again, Jose Alvarado's a lefty. He's been doing it all year all series against Yordan Alvarez. But they kept bringing up a good point. In a 7-game series, you're seeing a lefty. You're seeing him 4 or 5 times. It's you're going to start to pick up some things. Yordan saw Wheeler maybe twice, 4 times maybe, which is still less than he saw Jose Alvarado in the span of a series. So that, and Wheeler was when he was absolutely sharp. He gave up 2 weak hits. I'm sorry, but I need to trust my ace there. I need to trust my guy there. You are in the World Series, partially a big reason why, because of Zach Wheeler. You need to trust. And so, worst case scenario, obviously it's easy to look at it in hindsight, but you look at it now, worst case scenario, he gives up a home run. That's what happened anyway. And I know it's hindsight now. Obviously if Rom Thompson knew that Jose Alvarado was going to give up a home run, he'd probably just leave Zach Wheeler in. But at the end of the day, and this is where I wrestle with it, because they got to the World Series on the back of Jose Alvarado out of the bullpen, putting him in big time situations and getting outs. And it's just something I struggle with going back and forth, because Wheeler earned that at bat. He earned the ability to stay into that game. I feel like he earned the respect of his teammates, his coaches, and it didn't work out. At the end of the day, it just didn't work out. Aaron Nola obviously didn't look good in either one of his starts. I'm still a huge Aaron Nola defender. He had probably the 3 best starts of his career to get us even to that point. Obviously, the clincher in Houston, where he went 6 perfect innings and then gave up a hit and got pulled after that. The wild card Game 2, where he absolutely dominated. And then against the Braves in Game 2, absolutely dealt. This guy totally went all out for the Phils this year, and to just totally knock him down because of 2 starts in the World Series against one of the best lineups in the league. I'm sorry, but I'm going to give him a pass. And I know a lot of Phillies fans aren't going to do that with Aaron Nola, but he has earned that, especially with that run to get to the World Series. He has earned a little bit of slack. Obviously, he didn't have a great start against the Padres in the second start against the Padres. Kind of had a little bit of mess in the second start against the Padres too. So I just want to cut him a little bit of slack. I think he earned a little bit a benefit of the doubt for the World Series. Other than that, just some other thoughts wrapping up the World Series. The hitting was just a little less situational. Bryce kind of cooled off when the World Series came around. Schwarber continued to get hot, still hit some dingers. Obviously, as the series went on, they kind of pitched around Bryce. Castellanos was struggling down the stretch of the season, so I think it's going to be an interesting offseason, and that's kind of where we're going to move to now. Obviously, free agency opened up last week on Friday, I believe. It might have been Wednesday. One day last week, free agency opened back up, and it is a star-studded class. So in terms of the Phils, they win the pennant. They're coming into next year as defending champions out of the National League. So there's a lot to be positive about. There's also some holes to fill. The one good thing about the Phillies, there's about $70 million coming off the books this year. Now, there's plenty of needs. Some needs that I have written down. Middle infield, definitely, especially declining Gene Segura's option. You have middle infield needs. You have starting pitching needs with the loss of Noah Syndergaard, Kyle Gibson. You have, with some of those guys leaving, you have holes in the rotation. And then relief pitcher. You got guys like Yuri Familia, we DFA'd him, but he's coming off the books. You got David Robertson coming off the books. He'll be a free agent. Brad Hand coming off the books. He'll be a free agent. Corey Nebel, obviously he was hurt down the stretch, but coming off the books. He was used in a lot of tough spots this year. So you have holes to fill in the back end of your rotation. Granted, you have a lot of guys under contract. Sir Anthony Dominguez, Jose Alvarado is still under contract. You have some other guys. Bellatti's still going to be under contract. I'm trying to think of some other guys who are probably going to be big names. Those are the main guys, I guess you could say. And then After that, your rotation outside of Wheeler, Nola, Ranger Suarez had a great postseason. And then you got, guys like Bailey Falter in that fourth mix. You're going to have to fill in the back end of your rotation. It's going to be interesting. This is just another side note. Got so many thoughts going through my head. It's going to be really interesting to see whether or not the Phillies are aggressive with Andrew Painter, the Phillies' #1 prospect. He got moved up to Double-A after dominating Single-A this year and absolutely shoved. So if he starts at Double-A, really dominates, gets moved up to Triple-A, I want to know how aggressive they are with a guy like that. I could see them being a little bit aggressive. I'm a little bit nervous that Dave Dombrowski might move a couple of these guys for big name bats or other pitchers. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens there. I'm all over the place with some of those thoughts, but that is a potential option as a back end rotation. But you have like about $70 million to play with this year. You're already over the luxury tax, so it's not like you have that cap. That salary cap that Phillies have been observing for so long. You kind of have a little bit more leeway now. And like I mentioned, there's some needs in the bullpen. There's some needs in the back end of the rotation. But what everybody's here for is the middle infield need and specifically the shortstop market, because you got 4 guys who are going to command top dollar and who are elite shortstops in the league. #1 being Trey Turner, #2 Xander Bogaerts, #3 Carlos Correa, and #4 Dansby Swanson. All 4 of them free agents. And there's a lot of dots being connected between Trey Turner coming to the Phillies. Would be an absolute home run fit in this team. #1, really, really good glove at shortstop. #2, a prototypical leadoff hitter, which the Phillies haven't had in years. And a guy who also steals bases, who's aggressive on the base path, who provides speed for the lineup, but mainly a great glove at shortstop and a leadoff hitter. And that is exactly what the Phillies are looking for. Granted, if they settle for a guy in Xander Bogaerts, it's not settling to me. He's an all-star. He's a beast. He's got ties to David Dombrowski, so I could almost see them rather going that route. He's also probably going to be a little bit cheaper than Trey Turner, so I think that's also going to be something to play out for. But that's my wish list. Trey Turner, if the Phillies could sign Trey Turner, like, you're already over the cap at this point. You're going to pay him $30 million next year, for however many things. You're still going to have $40 million to fill out, probably 2 starting pitchers and then like 3 or 4 relievers, which you could pay some relievers $4 or $5 million each and, take some shots on some guys. And then maybe you have Bailey Falter, who's a long man, and you could kind of work some things around that way. But I think you gotta go big now. Trey Turner has been mentioned that he wants to move back to the East Coast after he got traded to the Dodgers. He wants to move back to the East Coast. He loved playing with Bryce Harper. He kind of wants to play with him again. I don't know, like, if that's really just gonna seal the deal, but I do think that he needs to be seriously considered. And it just would fit, because then you got Trey Turner in the leadoff hitter, and then you talk about maybe putting Kyle Schwarber #2, Bryce Harper #3, Castellanos #4. Then you can move Reese all the way down to like 6. You got Stotts 7, Marsh 8. The lineup is just unbelievable at that point, because maybe you even still lead off Schwarber. You go Schwarber, Turner 2, Bryce 3, Castellanos 4. Reese 5, Stott 6, and then JT Realmuto. I can't hear, then the whole lineup opens up. So I think Xander Bogaerts, when we kind of switch and talk about Xander Bogaerts a little bit, he's a little bit more middle of the lineup. I could see him batting second, so maybe Schwarber, Xander, Bryce, Castellanos, JT, kind of something like that. But you're talking about a lineup that is deep, deep, deep and can compete with a lineup like Houston. So I think that Dave Dombrowski is going to be very aggressive in the shortstop market. And, if it comes down to we're not going to get any of those guys and maybe sign a guy like Dansby Swanson, I would almost pass on that, bring back Gene Segura, and then just pour money into the pitching from that aspect. Because I love Dansby Swanson. I hate him because he's an Atlanta Brave and he's been a constant thorn in the side of Phillies fans. But if you're gonna shell out $160-70 million, like almost $200 million on a guy like that, I just he's an overachieving bat with a stud glove, and I feel like you can find defense and overachieving bats for cheaper prices. So I would be a little less inclined there. If we're gonna go all in, we might as well go all in with Trey Turner, Xander Bogaerts, and then fill in our pitching staff from there. So that's kind of where It's going to be interesting. The free agent market in terms of relief pitching is also moving very fast. Edwin Diaz signed for $100 million, the richest ever contract giving out to a reliever. He's going back to New York with the Mets, so he's getting a lot of money. Robert Suarez from San Diego, he got a 5-year, $46 million deal. Phillies fans know him. He was the pitcher that Bryce Harper hit his hit his go-ahead home run in Game 5 of the NLCS. Stud reliever, don't get that at bat for you. He's a great reliever, but he went for $46 million over 5 years. So the way that money breaks down is, less per year, but still $46 million. That's a lot of cash. Rafael Montero of Houston just got $34 million for 3 years. So that's another, really good arm who's going to get $10+ million a year. The reliever market is moving quick. So that's where you almost have to take a lot of low bargain guys and kind of see how it goes from there. But overall, it's just phenomenal to kind of be thinking a couple pieces away now. Now that the Phils have proven it. Honestly, I think kind of looking into next year, I think there's going to be a couple things that happen. Number one, Nick Castellanos, I think, is going to play much, much better. I think a lot of you guys don't want to hear that, but I think it's the truth. I think that he had a wrist injury last year, and I don't think that. I know that. And before he had that wrist injury, a lot of people don't want to remember this, but he was our best hitter early in the year last year. April and May, he was our best hitter. Always found a way to just put bat on the ball and get hits. He was hitting over 300. He had 5 or 6 home runs. I know he only finished with 14 or 15. A lot of that came early in the year. A lot of you guys don't want to hear that, but he is going to play better. He already had a feature with Ken Rosenthal during the playoffs too. It's like when he signed with the Phils, it was, okay, the lockout ends. Rush to find a team. Rush to sign. Okay, now rush to spring training. Okay, now rush to find a house. Okay, now rush to meet your teammates. Now rush to get ingrained in the locker room. Rush to find your role. Rush to find your thing. Then he had a kid on top of that. And he just talked about how his mind was in a million different places, running a million miles an hour. Granted, he is a professional athlete. He's making $100 million. He should be able to deal with that. But they're all humans at the end of the day. I'm going to cut him some slack. And going into next year, he's got the weight off his shoulders of the Phillies made the playoffs. He's got his, he's going into an offseason healthy where he can, rest up just nicks and bruises. And then he knows exactly where he's going to be playing. He knows exactly where he's going to live. He knows everything. He's going to get into spring training, have plenty of at-bats to get into it. And as long as he stays healthy, I believe he is going to be much more like the guy he was in 2021, where he won the Silver Slugger at the outfield position, than he was in 2022. So if you get that, that's already a huge boost to your team. Number two, you're going to have a big splash in free agency. I don't know who it's going to be. I don't know what position group it's going to be. But Dave Dombrowski, now that he has the green light of being over the salary cap, is going to make a ton of moves. So I am personally excited to see Nick Castellanos absolutely flourish in his second year in Philly. Number two, where Dave Dombrowski works the roster. And then number three, Bryce Harper's health is going to be a major question mark going into the year. Obviously, he has a torn UCL in his elbow, was a big issue for him this year. Obviously, he was DHing all year, so that was a huge reason why he wasn't out in right field. Once he gets out in right field again, the defense in the outfield is going to improve. You're going to have a full season of Brandon Marsh in center field. And then hopefully, we'll see what happens with Bryce's elbow. He's getting looked at, I believe, today. He might have been getting meeting with doctors, getting a couple opinions on whether he needs surgery or not. If he doesn't need surgery, I don't know if he's used to. The thing is, the World Baseball Classic's coming up too. Bryce already said he was going to play. So if he gets surgery, he's probably knocked out for that. He's probably out for the first month or two of the season. If he doesn't, and it's just rest and recovery, he probably plays in the World Baseball Classic. He probably start the Phillies. And then it kind of just becomes a question mark of does he re-aggravate it? I'm nervous. I'm worried. A torn UCL is never good. The rest and recovery route usually isn't as successful. You see it a lot with pitchers. It usually isn't very often, but you're also not throwing as much being an outfielder as a pitcher. So we're going to see there. But then again, one of Bryce's best defensive traits is his arm. So we're going to see there. But that is going to be a major question mark going into next year. So I think that there is a lot to like. You have your top 3 pitchers coming back. You have the meat of your lineup all coming back. You have your stud relievers coming back. And a lot of these guys have been here the last couple of years and now have the weight off their shoulders of making the playoffs, winning a pennant. it's not like it's also not like they just made the wild card round and then lost to the Cardinals or something like that. Like they won the pennant in the National League, and I think that's just going to give them such like a confidence boost, just a weight off their shoulders that they can be that team. So I think those are the three biggest things we're going to look for as we move into the year. Obviously, if things break and we sign Trey Turner, we sign Xander Bogaerts, you're going to hear from us. We're going to put podcasts out. I'm going to get a lot of guests on so we can talk about that. But overall, I think it was a great year. It was a fairy tale run, and just couldn't be happier with what the Phillies put out there this year. And we'll see what they do in the free agency market. But there will be more Phillies talks. You can definitely be sure to tune in once we get some more news and information. All right, everyone, that is going to do it for the show today. Once again, check the description below for all our social media handles. You can see it in the box here on the video as well. Feel free to shoot us any questions, DM, text message, anything like that, comments on Instagram, and we'll try to get it in on the show. We're always open to questions, so feel free to shoot us them anywhere you can. Thank you guys once again for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you again next time.